Pleasure to be here with you. My name is Father Carlos Martins. The Vatican appointed me as the director of this pilgrimage of the major relics of Saint Jude the Apostle. This is the first time his relics have left Italy since they were taken to Italy in 335 AD by the Emperor Constantine. So this is a great occasion. It is a great grace to be in the presence of a relic. Doubly so when the relic belongs to an apostle, to a man chosen by Christ to be one of his closest collaborators, a man whom Christ formed and taught, who ministered alongside Christ, who lived with him, who ate with him. And Jude is further special in that he is the first cousin of Jesus Christ. The Church Fathers inform us Jude is the son of Mary of Clopas. And if her name is familiar to you, it is so because she is one of the three Marys who stood at the foot of the Lord's cross at his crucifixion. There was, of course, the Blessed Virgin Mary, Mary Magdalene, and Mary of Clopas. The Fathers inform us that Mary of Clopas and the Blessed Virgin Mary are blood sisters, making her son, Saint Jude, and her other son, also an apostle, St. James the Less, first cousins of Jesus Christ. So we have here not just the relics of an apostle. We have here family of Jesus. Many times, this arm embraced the body of the Savior of the world. This is how close we are to Jesus in this moment. Jude, among the apostles, at least insofar as the gospel text is concerned, is easily the apostle who has the lowest profile. Stated in different words, Jude is the biggest nobody among the 12. In the entire gospel, he utters one single sentence, and that's a question he poses to Jesus on the night of the Last Supper. And it's a question that no one can ever remember. And by the looks on your faces, I can tell you can't remember that. Here's his question. How come? That's it. Exit stage right. The Lord has just stated he is not going to reveal himself to the world in the same way that he has to his apostles, and that perplexes Jude. Because he interprets that to mean that the world is going to miss out. That the world is not going to receive as much as what the apostles have received. Little does he know what Jesus has planned. On the following day, he will suffer and die for the world's sin, for all the world's sin, throughout time. And 3 days later to rise from the dead, and in doing so, open the gates of heaven. Jude does write an epistle of the New Testament, but at 25 verses in length, 1 page. It is the shortest of the New Testament epistles. His name is the cause of endless confusion. His name is Judas, but to distinguish him from the other renowned Judas among the 12, in English it has been decided decades ago to abbreviate his name to Jude. The problem is, some editions of the Bible in English preserve his name as Judas, others call him Jude. Some folks reading those two variants interpret that to mean two different men are being spoken of, when in fact it is one. Some New Testament authors, to distinguish him from all the other Judases, because the name Judas was one of the most common male names during New Testament time, equivalent to Bob or Steve within American culture. So to distinguish him from all the other Judases, some New Testament authors refer to him by his nickname, Thaddeus or Thaddeus, depending upon how you choose to pronounce it in English. But there is a problem with even the nickname, because the nickname Thaddeus was a generic male nickname that any male could have. The English equivalent is Bubba. We have relics of St. Bubba here for veneration. As the New Testament progressed, he began to be called Jude of James. Jude of James. Almost always, and there's only one exception, when the New Testament lists that formula, this guy of that guy, what is being stated is that this guy is the son of that guy. In other words, you're naming a man in reference to his father. The one exception applies to, you guessed it, Saint Jude. James is not his father, it is his brother, who in contrast to Jude, who had a very low profile, St. James the Less had an immense profile because he was the Bishop of Jerusalem. Now there's a high office for him. First bishop of the first diocese of the world. So here is the irony. Jude is the lesser known brother of St. James the Less. So there's a story here. How do you go from being what Jude is in the New Testament, the nobody among the 12, to being what he is today? Jude is easily one of the most popular saints in the church. There are more shrines to Saint Jude the Apostle worldwide than to any other saint, with the exception of his holy aunt, the Blessed Virgin Mary. So how do you go from being the nobody to being the superstar? And that is the point of this homily. Because many of us love St. Jude and have cultivated a devotion to him throughout our whole lives. But very few of us know anything about him. And in knowing more about him, we are able to love more. The heart begins to grow when it is fed by knowledge of the other. We know that the first place at which Jude ministered after Pentecost was at the city of Edessa within the kingdom of Armenia. How that came about is fascinating. The king of Armenia, Abgar V, was dying of a terrible illness. And he had heard about this Jesus of Nazareth who went around from town to town and village to village healing people. And evidently, he was the real thing, because news of his healing abilities had reached Abgar all the way in Armenia. Armenia is nowhere near Israel. It is across the Asian peninsula. So Abgar sent 2 spies to go and observe the Lord, to see whether he was the real thing. And the spies returned saying to the king, "We followed this guy. He's the real thing. He really heals people." One of the 2 spies was an artist, and he sketched an image of the Lord's face and presented it to the king, saying, "This is what the guy looks like." So Abgar wrote the Lord a letter, and he sent an envoy to hand deliver to him. And his letter stated this: "I hear you are a healer. Please, if you are able, come to me and set me free from this terrible illness that is taking my life." And the Lord actually wrote him a response. And this is a big deal, because it is the only time that Jesus Christ left behind a piece of writing. And in his reply to Abgar, the Lord states, "I must fulfill the work of the one who sent me. But after I have returned to him, I will send someone to do what you ask of me in my name. Baba is the one whom he sent. And as a pledge that the Lord would fulfill what he promises Abgar in his letter, the Lord took a cloth, pressed his face into the cloth, and the image of his holy face miraculously remained behind him. Now this is not the veil of Veronica, this is not the Shroud of Turin. Those are different miraculous images produced later, during the time of the Lord's Passion. The image of Edessa, as this image has come to be known, was the first of the miraculous images that the Lord produced of his holy face. And it was reverenced immensely in the ancient world. Even today, the Eastern churches, the Eastern Orthodox and the Eastern Catholic churches, have a special Mass they celebrate specifically in honor of that image, which they refer to as the Holy Mandalaya, the holy image not made by hands. And in the Lord producing this image, he reveals something of the character of God. It reveals that among the other qualities that God possesses, he is also playful. Abgar sent an artist to sketch the face of the Lord. In producing the image of Edessa, the Lord is saying to Abgar, I can do even better than that guy. Here you go. So among all the other things one can say about God, he is also playful. The two letters exchanged between the Lord and Abgar, along with the image of Edessa, were kept at the archives of Edessa for centuries, and they were witnessed to by a great many of the church fathers, including the famous Saint Eusebius of Caesarea, the greatest of the ancient Christian historians. Most of our knowledge of the ancient church, the primitive Christian church, we obtain from Eusebius. And no one in the ancient world doubted the authenticity of the letters or of the image. Unfortunately, none of the three exist any longer. All three were kept at France and were destroyed by the revolutionaries during the French Revolution. We possess the text of the letters because the text was copied over many times. We no longer possess the actual letters nor the image of Edessa. Regardless, all records state that when Jude entered into Armenia and walked into the city of Edessa and was led into the chamber where Abgar the king was lying on his back dying, light was emanating from Jude's flesh. And he walked up to the king and placed his right arm on him, this arm, and Abgar was healed instantly, and immediately converted to the Christian faith. The records state that Jude remained behind in Armenia for a period of time and healed a great many of the cities of the nation's sick. And Armenia has the glory and honor of being the first nation in history to convert to Christianity in total. For this reason, when you visit when you visit Jerusalem today, Jerusalem is not in Armenia, it is in Israel. But it is divided into 4 quarters. There's the Jewish quarter, the Muslim quarter, the generic Christian quarter, and the Armenian Christian quarter. All because of the ministry of this man. Following his time in Armenia, the records pertaining to Jude get a little bit fuzzier. We know that he ministered in ancient Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq. We know he ministered in ancient Persia, modern-day Iran. And we know that he ministered within the regions of Tyre and Sidon, modern-day Lebanon. The records, however, are divided as to whether he met his demise, whether he suffered martyrdom in ancient Persia, modern-day Iran, or at the city of Beirut within modern-day Lebanon. Regardless, all records are unanimous in that he was martyred with his missionary partner, St. Simon the Apostle. Jude was clubbed to death and then beheaded with an axe. Simon was cut in half with a saw. This is why when you see an image depicted of Jude, whether a statue or a painting, he is always depicted holding a club. That is a reference to the instrument of his martyrdom. Always on his chest is an image of the Lord's holy face, which is a reference to the image of Edessa, for which Jude is forever linked. The bodies of the two apostles were buried in the ground near the location of their martyrdom, and two events then occurred which combined form the reasons why we possess these relics today, and how we know with certainty that they belong to Saint Jude the Apostle. The first event is that Christians did what Christians do. They erected a church over top of their graves. And the existence of the church answers or provides three pieces of information. The first is it marks where the apostles were buried. It's hard to lose track of a couple of bodies when there's a large stone church built over top of it. It provided a place for the Sunday Eucharist. From the very beginning of the church, Mass was always celebrated over the tombs of the saints. That is why at the start and at the end of Mass, the clerics who celebrate it venerate the altar with a kiss. What we are doing is kissing the relics. We're greeting the saints whose relics have been embedded inside the altar. Every altar is a tomb. The third thing established by the church is the preservation of the bones of the apostles by keeping them dry and free from exposure to the elements. Bone can keep indefinitely, as long as it is kept dry. The other event that occurs is an irony. God made use, for his own advantage, of pagan Roman superstition. The ancient Romans and these two apostles, Simon and Jude, were martyred within the confines of the Roman Empire. The ancient Romans were an immensely superstitious people. They were, among other things, deathly afraid of ghosts. For this reason, they had numerous prohibitions written into their laws restricting what you could do to somebody's grave. You were never permitted to desecrate it or otherwise mess with it, even a grave belonging to an enemy of Rome. Why? Because the Romans believed if you messed with a grave, you might stir up a ghost. And then, once you've got a ghost on your hands, who are you going to call? So the existence of the church answers the question, where were the apostles buried? And how is it possible that their bones were preserved through the ages? The existence of pagan Roman superstition answers the question, but how can we be certain that the bodies of the apostles were the ones removed from those graves later? So the two skeletons remained in the ground where they were buried until the year 335, when then Constantine the Great, Emperor of Rome, exhumed them and transported them to Rome, and he placed them within the new grand basilica that he was building in honor of St. Peter the Apostle. He placed them within the altar of the left transept of his basilica. So the Basilica of St. Peter is built in the shape of a giant cross. In the left wing of that cross, at its very end, is a high altar known as the altar of St. Joseph. Constantine placed the skeletons of Jude and Simon directly beneath that altar, where they remain to this day. 500 years ago, Jude's right arm was removed and placed within this carved wooden reliquary, and all of the above events are the reasons why we possess these relics for veneration today, and how we know with certainty that they belong to Saint Jude the Apostle. Following Jude's death, an irony occurred. He entered into the fullness of the dignity and identity of his vocation in a way that is absolutely uncanny. God was saving up his plan for Jude in this life once Jude left this life, to such an extent that a case could be made that Saint Jude the Apostle is the greatest evangelist in Christian history, because the greatest events of Christian history have Jude's fingerprints all over them. I will share with you just two of them. In the year 250, Valerian became emperor of Rome. Valerian was a butcher who hated Christians. He hated them more than even the emperors Nero and Diocletian, under whom tens of thousands of Christians lost their lives. Valerian's first act of office was to issue a series of 8 decrees he thought would stamp out and eradicate the Christian faith once and for all. Now, to give you a flavor, one of those decrees, for example, stated this: if you rat out on a Christian, he is executed, his property and possessions are confiscated, but you are entitled to a cut of each of them. So there was a financial incentive for you to rat out on a Christian. Valerian issued these series of 8 decrees and then promptly went off to make war against the Sufi, or king, of Persia. And among all of the places on this planet where these two gigantic armies met in war, they met in war, ironically, at the city of Edessa within the kingdom of Armenia. The city and nation made Christians and made holy by this man. The unimaginable happened. To that point in time, ancient Rome had existed for over 1,200 years. Militarily, it had never suffered defeat. The Roman military machine was the most feared army in the world because it was evidently unconquerable. On that day, not only did the Roman army lose, the entire Roman army was captured, including the Emperor Valerian. Valerian was taken to Persia to be the personal slave of the Sufi. The records from the time state that among the other humiliations he had to endure, he had to get down on his hands and knees and serve as a stool for the Sufi to step on his back while mounting his horse. He died as the Sufi slave 7 years later, never setting eyes on his homeland again. Upon the capture of his father, Valerian's son immediately became emperor. And he recognized, it is because of what my father did against the Christians that Rome is suffering this catastrophic embarrassment. In other words, it was his belief that Christian God was exacting revenge for what his father had decreed against the Christians. So his first act of office was to rescind the anti-Christian decrees promulgated by his father. And that began what historians today call the Little Peace of the Church, a 40-year period, the longest in the ancient world, where Christians could live peacefully and persecution-free. Following the close of those 40 years, the persecutions fired up again in earnest. But then, some 23 years later, a young Roman general named Constantine, whose name you've already heard this evening, was getting ready to face a rival general at the Battle of Milvian Bridge within the city of Rome. Milvian Bridge is an ancient stone bridge that still exists to this day. I have walked over it many times. That battle that day, fought over that bridge, is easily the most decisive battle in human history. Because if Constantine had not won that battle, friends, you and I today would not be Christians. Constantine was severely outnumbered and was widely expected to lose. But as he was getting ready, as he was marching towards that bridge, as he was getting ready to fight, he saw written in the sky these words: "In this sign you will conquer." And then there was an image of a chiron, a P with an X through the step, an ancient Christian symbol representing the first 2 letters of the Greek word for Christ. Constantine ordered each of his men to paint a Cairo on his shield. And they won that day, against every odds. And Constantine recognized, it is not because of my skills as a commander, nor the power of the man whom I commanded, by which we won today. We won today because the Christian God fought on our behalf. And so pagan Constantine immediately converted to the Christian faith, and he made it a capital crime punishable by execution if you were to persecute a Christian. And while he didn't force anyone to convert to the Christian faith, if you wanted a position in his government, or if you wanted a promotion within the saint, those were reserved only for Christians. And so, protected by the strength and now the faith of the Roman Empire, Christianity was free to disseminate itself across the entire civilized world. And that is the reason why, friends, you and I today are Christians. All because of the Battle of Milvian Bridge, which occurred on October 28th, feast day of Saint Jude the Apostle. As the churches in Rome were singing their closing hymn at the solemn Mass of Saint Jude, Constantine was being declared the victor and being proclaimed new Roman Emperor. Following the Christianization of Europe, another irony occurred. All devotion to Saint Jude the Apostle worldwide ceased for 1,200 years. From 500 until 1700, no one prayed to Saint Jude the Apostle. A cancerous thinking emerged and spread throughout all of Christendom. A cancerous thinking that was diabolical in origin. It was a revenge by the enemy of God against Jude for what he did at the Battle of Edessa when he usurped the 1,200-year record of non-defeat of pagan Rome's army. Such that for 1,200 years, beginning in 500, the devil made it, he brought it about that no one prayed to Saint Jude the Apostle. Here's how he did it. Now, I'm not making a word of this up, but get ready to giggle. He implanted this notion in people's minds. If I pray to Saint Judas, my prayers may inadvertently go to Judas Iscariot, the betrayer, and so they won't be heard. So all devotion to Saint Jude the Apostle worldwide ceased. Until 1700, when something happened which was absolutely a divine action. It had to be, because it occurred simultaneously, worldwide, all at once. What happened was a situation where there were myriads upon myriads of people worldwide, thousands of people, all disconnected from one another. But what united them all was that they all needed a miracle. Not just a grace, not just a favor, but a miracle for either this situation or that. And so they begged God, imploring him to grant that miracle. But no miracle was forthcoming. They implored each and every one of the church's saints, going up and down the list of the saints, begging that they obtain from the Lord the miracle they needed. But no miracle was forthcoming. And then God planted in all of these folks this notion. You know, you've tried everyone else. What have you got to lose? Send your prayers his way. And you know what happened? Baba hit every one of those petitions out of the ball. And it was from that time, from 1700, that Saint Jude the Apostle became known as patron saint of hopeless cases and desperate situations, because only hopeless cases and desperate situations were given him. And he has rightly, from that time, earned the nickname of the Apostle of the impossible, and enjoys a popularity today that is surpassed only by the popularity of the Mother of God. Think of the last time that you walked down the candle aisle at a grocery or dollar store. When you reached the votive candles, what did you see? You saw candles of the Blessed Mother front and center. But even if you saw candles of no other saint, you saw candles of this guy right next to her. Immensely popular. But I will tell you this, friends. If you had walked up to Saint Jude 2,000 years ago, on Good Friday, on the Good Friday, in the evening, after our Lord had already hung on the cross, and after his lifeless body had already been taken down, and that body was now inside a tomb getting cold. If you had walked up to Saint Jude in that moment and said to him something like this, "Oh my God in heaven, it is an absolute honor to meet one of the original 12 apostles, and a blood relative of Jesus Christ to boot. The church one day is going to hail you as one of its greatest saints. We are going to celebrate the most beautiful Mass for you at St. Pius Church in Redwood City, CA, in front of the presence of your Holy Office." If you had said to him something like this, at best, he would have rolled his eyes at you. At worst, he would have vomited and ran away. Because in that moment, friends, all Jude felt like was a total and complete loser. Earlier that day, when his Lord and relative needed him most, as he hung on the cross, Jude was nowhere to be found. His mother had the guts to stand at the foot of the cross, but he didn't. And so when the Lord rose from the dead and made his first resurrection appearance to his apostles, the first thing the Lord had to do was forgive them for their unfaithfulness. Yes, John stood at the foot of the cross at the crucifixion, but even he had ran away at the time of the Lord's arrest. So the first words out of the mouth of the resurrected Lord, when he appeared to his apostles, were words of forgiveness and absolution. "Peace be with you," he said to them. But then Jude, in that moment, had to do something that was absolutely heroic. He had to accept that forgiveness. And that, friends, is no small thing. Because when we've messed up big time, when we've screwed up royally, the easiest thing to do is hate ourselves and despise ourselves and hold ourselves in contempt. And we can even tell ourselves that such a mistreatment is good and just, because I messed up, and so I don't deserve happiness. I deserve pain and misery. And we can even come to believe that God himself is pleased by such a mistreatment we offer ourselves. How could anything that contradicts Scripture ever be pleasing to God, who commands us, who orders us over and over in his word to forgive our enemies? Well, that holds true, friends, even if your enemy is your own very self. The hardest thing, but the most profitable, that many of us will ever do, is to stand in front of the mirror and look back at that person who is staring at us and say to that person, "I forgive you. I release you from what I hold against you. And I ask God to give you a blessing instead." That is exactly what this man did to himself. And I will tell you this, When Jesus Christ, resurrected in the flesh, was standing in front of him saying, "I want you on my team once again," going through his head was the loudest voice he had ever heard in his life, saying to him, "Just walk away from the Lord. No, run away from him. Because you're too much of an incompetent, too much of a nobody, too much of a loser to be of any use to Jesus Christ. Just run away from him now, and then he can replace you with somebody better than you. Somebody who will be useful to him. Because you are useless. You're the idiot who never talks." And so in that moment, friends, Jude had to make a decision. Does he listen to the voice of a man who is also God, who has just conquered sin and death? Or does he listen to the voice of dysfunction, the same voice of dysfunction that resides within all of us? And thank God for his sake, and for yours and for mine, that he made the choice that he did. Because it would have been the easiest thing in the world for him to walk away from the Lord. And so, friends, Jude has to be a reminder for you and for me. He has to be a sign that God has great plans for you and I. God's plan for you is to make you into a great saint. And if you're a nobody, if you're a loser, God does his best work with people like you. Just ask this guy. And so at the end of this Mass, when you come forward to venerate these relics, you need to know one thing. It is not just Saint Jude's bones that are here in front of you. All of Saint Jude the Apostle is here present. And as a saint, as an agent or emissary, he has come a long way for the chance to meet you personally. And so when you are in front of him, you need to say to him two things. Jude, I accept you as my friend. I accept you as my friend. When you're in front of him, say those words. You don't have to say them out loud, but say them. I accept you as my friend. Next, say to him, I accept the gift you have for me today. I accept your gift. He's got a gift for everybody. I have no idea what that gift will be for you. It is different and unique for each person. But friends, you just need to trust me on this one. He's got a gift for you, but cannot give it to you unless you accept it. Accept your friendship and your gift. Give him all of your prayer intentions, whatever it is that is on your heart. But I will tell you right now what's going to happen. Either on your way home from this event, or perhaps later tonight as you're getting into bed, maybe sometime tomorrow, you're going to smack your head and you're going to say something like this. Oh my God in heaven, I forgot to pray for my sick Aunt Selma. How could I forget my Aunt Selma? I even prayed for Frank at work and I can't stand Frank. It doesn't matter. When you leave here today, your friend is going to leave with you. He will never leave you. And so when that intention, or whatever intention, comes to mind down the road, you turn to your friend and you say, Jude, I need you to do something for my Aunt Selma, or for this person, or for that family, or that situation. And your friend, who is so beloved by God, that God finds his requests, his petitions, irresistible. Your friend will get to work on your behalf. You are welcome to touch the glass of the display case. In fact, you are encouraged to do so. Why? Every time relics are mentioned in the scripture, every time, two things always occur. There is always a healing. There is never not a healing. Touch is the way by which that healing comes about. not because relics are magical, they are not magical, but because the entire saint is present in his or her relics. All of Saint Jude the Apostle is here present. Any object of devotion that you touch to that glass will become a relic of Saint Jude, meaning his presence will be permanently attached to that object. You can touch whatever you like, a rosary, a holy card, a medal, your necklace, a wedding band. We hear about touched relics in Acts chapter 19. Paul the Apostle, they would touch him with rags. Put the rags on the sick, two things would occur. Their diseases would leave them, and if they had evil spirits, they would depart from them. Make a relic here today. Take it home with you. And down the road, when you're going through a rough time, or you know someone else who is, you take that relic and you put it on that person, and you say, Jude, I need you to do something for this person. And your friend who dwells in God's very heart will get to work on your behalf. If you wish, there is something you can do for Saint Jude. Later on in this Mass, there will be a collection taken up for his shrine in Italy. His shrine, the shrine of Saint Jude, is very close to St. Peter's Basilica. It has a great big dome on top of it, just like St. Peter's does. That dome has been heavily damaged by weather events. It has to be extensively restored. Later on in this Mass, there will be a collection taken up, the proceeds of which will be for the restoration of St. Jude's dome. If you wish to do something for St. Jude, you might consider making a contribution. But I will tell you this. This tour began last September at a church in downtown Chicago. I was 1 hour away from that church when my cell phone went on. On the other end of the phone was a gentleman named Doug Edwards. Doug is a man from Michigan whom I met years ago at one of these relic events. He introduced himself to me and he said to me, Father, I own a printing shop. If you ever have printing needs, let me know. I contacted him last summer. I said, Doug, the Vatican has placed me in charge of the pilgrimage of St. Jude. I need to produce great big pull-up banners. Do you know are you able to produce those? He said, sure, Father. I said, okay, I will send you the digital files. You can price them out. Send me an invoice and I'll fire off a check to you. And he said to me, well, Father, I'm not going to charge you. I said, Doug, I don't think you know how many or how large of banners I need. Those are the banners all along the back of the church here. I said to him, the last time I produced this many of these large-sized banners, the cost was over $20,000. He said, Father, I'm not charging you. This is going to be my gift to St. Jude, and giving him this gift is going to make me feel like I'm evangelizing alongside an apostle. What do you say to that? When he had them finished, I called him up. I said, Doug, I'm coming by to get them. I'm bringing the apostle with me. So call whatever friends and family members you like to your print shop. They can have some up-close and personal time with St. Jude. Now, Doug's wife, Noreen, I had never met at that time. In 2001, she had a condition develop in her brain for which surgery was necessary, but that surgery left her in a terrible way. It left her in a vegetative state. 10 days after the surgery, she was still in a coma. The surgeons went in to do a second surgery to try to bring her out of that coma, which it thankfully worked, but it left her without the ability to walk or talk. After a grueling regimen of physiotherapy over a great length of time, she was able to relearn to talk, but she was never able to get her mobility back. And so, she was an invalid. When I arrived at Doug's shop, I asked him, Doug, which one of these people here is your wife, Noreen? I want to pray with her with St. Jude. And he said to me, well, Father, unfortunately, Noreen is having a bad day today. She wasn't able to make it. So I said to him, no problem. We'll go to your house. We'll bring the saint with us. And he said to me, well, Father, I am so grateful for your offer. But Noreen is having a very bad day today and is just not up for a visit. So I went up to Jude and said to him, Jude, Doug is your friend. He has done a lot for you. I need you to do something for his wife, Noreen. The next day, Doug went home for lunch, and his lunch routine was always the same. He would go home, prepare lunch, feed his wife, feed himself, return to work. When he walked through the door of his house that day, the unimaginable had taken place. Lunch was already on the table because Noreen had prepared it. Because all her afflictions and infirmities are gone. In that phone call, when I was 1 hour away from the first stop on this tour, in other words, this tour had not yet even started, Doug Edwards was screaming at me over and over in that call, my wife is darting about the house like a young girl. The apostle of the impossible knocked another one out of the ballpark. Friends, if you take nothing else with you from this experience today, if you take nothing else home with you, make sure you take home this guy as your friend. You will never